We're recording. Go ahead.
How's it going, everybody, today? Me and Clayton are back at it again this week with a new podcast. This one is going to be about defrost in walk-ins, all right? So I'm going to let you start it off with whatever strategy of defrost you want to start with at
Okay.
any store.
All right. So we'll start with walk-in coolers, right? Not shop-in coolers. We'll get into that at the end. That is a whole nother disaster. But walk-in coolers, okay? Produce coolers, meat coolers, all sorts of stuff. I'll start with like dairy coolers and produce coolers and bakery coolers, right? They are medium temp, but they're high enough that they have what's called off-cycle defrost. All right. So with off-cycle defrost, all it's doing is literally just an off-cycle. Fans
Yeah.
stay running. They shut it. Now, there's a few strategies. They could shut the solenoid off for the liquid, pump it all out, or they can shut both liquid and suction, which it's six one half dozen the other, whoever likes. Theoretically, you can get probably a more efficient defrost shutting the liquid and suction at the same time, but it doesn't hurt to pump it all down either, right? Either way is fine, right? And usually a good number, I think, is I was like 6 a day is my favorite number for off-cycle defrost, right? Usually 6 a day at 30 minutes, 6 a day at 45 minutes. Anywhere in there will get you pretty close. And if you have to go way higher than that, 8, 10, 12 a day, there's something else going on here, right?
Yeah,
But
no, you don't.
no, 6 a day. And then this also goes back to, not to go back to what we talked about last time, is got to make sure your strip curtains are good, right? And the way we like to do strip curtains, I feel you should be able to prop that door open. Now, obviously, you don't want the store doing this because they're going to do it anyways. But we've had, for instance, where we've had bad rollers, and we've had a dairy cooler last week. We had that bad boy ratchet strapped open, and it had good strip curtains, and it made temp, no problems, right? So just be mindful, with that. So off-cycle defrost is just basic understanding. It shuts the solenoid, either one or both, or if we have another client we do work for that has liquid lines, but no liquid line solenoids. They just have stepper valves, right? And they'll just run that stepper valve closed, and they'll just fill the whole line up with refrigerant essentially, and then it shuts it off. So that'd be the same difference as shutting both solenoids off at the same time. And the jury's out on what's better, but
yeah, because some people will tell you, like at a specific place, what he's talking about, they shut both. And then you would think, okay, well, if the evap is full of refrigerant, when you heat that refrigerant up, it would probably more evenly heat that coil theoretically. But then some people will say, no, that's not how that works. And then they're going to say pumping the whole circuit down is the only way to go. So it really depends engineer to engineer, really.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, here's the truth that nobody wants to talk about, or everybody knows, but nobody says, is what works in the Midwest and what works on the West Coast doesn't work in Florida.
No.
And it doesn't work in Texas, right?
Nope.
And finally, I feel people are starting to understand that. The one client in particular, Justin knows, they've started to actually come around a little bit to realize, that Florida is hot 10 and a half months a year, right?
Yeah.
It's actually been cooler for a good while here, but it's always 100% humidity, basically, and it's always super hot, right? So just what may work out west or in the Midwest or up north does not work here, right? And the other thing to remember, and this is not to get on the heat rant here, it may get hot. But like, for instance, we do work for some people who their home office is based up in the New England area. Well, it gets hot here, but it's 50 degrees at night, okay? In the middle of summer in Florida, it's 85 and
at night.
Like a wet towel in front of a fan at night. So just something to remember, defrost is going to vary. Now, there are clients that are like dead set on the rules for defrost, but if you're in good and you could talk to who is running the area, you can get a little lenient with that to help you out. So that's off-cycle defrost, and I'll let Justin take the next one.
So off-cycle, another thing, so in meat boxes at specific places, you're going to have defrost most of the time in meat boxes. So the set point is going to be normally 28 degrees.
Hey, decipher. There's two types of meat boxes at this one client you're talking about.
So there's a meat prep, and then there's a meat cooler, right? So your meat prep is going to be different than your meat cooler, okay? Now, your meat cooler is going to have the heaters inside the meat cooler. And the reasoning for that is if your coil is running, roughly 20-ish degrees, that coil is going to build ice up. So then you're going to need heaters to thaw that ice out, obviously. So off cycle is not going to work with a 28-degree box because there's going to be too much ice on there, and it's below 32. So what you're going to have heaters. A lot of people don't really read into that. They think, oh, since it's not a freezer, I don't have heaters, but you actually do have heaters. And most of the time in your meat boxes, they're your walk-in meat cooler specifically. It's going to be low profile coils with one heater on each side. And then you're going to have a drain heater as well.
Now, something to watch out for, the switches. I'll let Justin talk about that, the shenanigans.
So when you guys walk into one of these walk-in coolers, there's going to be switches up on the ceiling a lot of the time, and they're a flip switch. Flip it either way. They're not actual like light switches or anything. So these flip switches, a lot of hackers tend to not pay attention to when they put these covers back on for these flip switches, and you have to pay attention, right? So what I like to do with these covers is I put my amp clamp on the heater, because sometimes these things get messed with a lot, right, over the years. So you're going to have the switch originally was on in this position, but now they flipped the whole switch around. So I just keep my amp clamp on the heaters. I decipher which way is actually on or off, and then I put the cover on accordingly. That way, someone going up there to work on it after you is not like, oh yeah, they're on. They're definitely on, Bob, and they're not on. So they're actually off because someone didn't actually pay attention to whether or not the heaters are getting power or not. So just always make sure with those flip switches that you're paying attention what is actually on, what is actually off, because they get moved all the time and they also break all the time. So it's literally just a little black, I'm going to call it like, it literally just looks like
a rocker switch almost.
Yeah, it's like a rocker switch. Yeah, that's all it is. And they break off all the time. And sometimes they'll get kind of like in the middle position between on and off. And sometimes you'll just have to take the whole cover off and flip it on and then put the cover back on. It all depends. But they break all the time. So just make sure that you pay attention to that in the walk-in meat coolers, because they do have heaters in there. Do you want to talk about the meat prep versus the meat cooler? The temperature is different?
Yeah, so usually meat coolers, and it's about the same at both places we do a lot of work at. It's about 28 degrees is usually the set point for a meat cooler. Now it can vary up to 30, maybe down to 26, but about 28 is even, which is why you need the heaters. But now the meat preps, now there's two different types. The meat preps of one place we work at have low profile EVAPs, and they really don't prepare meat or anything. They buy all the meat prepared. No. But these rooms are running about 48.5 to 50. It all depends, around 45 sometimes. And you'll find where people get grubby paws and they'll turn them way down, then you run into problems. We're around, I don't know, around between 40 and 50, right, is going to be your average set point. Sometimes 36, but man, it gets cold, and then it's a whole nother thing. Now, the other client we do work for doesn't actually have EVAPs in the rooms.
Yeah.
They actually have giant glycol air handlers. And I see the novelty, because guess what? There's not fans, because, oh man, if you could see the stuff that comes out of these meat prep coils, right? And whenever you got to clean them, it's a pain, to get everybody to move stuff like we talked about moving. On the one client, it is nice because we could just show up and clean them. Nobody knows the wires were there. We just get it done. So I see the novelty in that. And believe it or not, those with the air handlers have it's literally like an AC system. There is literally washable filters, returns, and supplies in there.
Right.
Now, something to notice, Justin found this down in Bradenton at a store. We had the washables, but then some well-hearted person, i.e. the filter company, stuck washable paper filters in. Remember? And
double
it kept
filter.
over. Yeah. And here's the thing. If it was double filter, but the worst part was they were freaking paper filters.
Yeah.
And they were like hard as a rock, buddy. And, he found that. And because he found that, man, probably 3 months ago, I went to another place in Clearwater where they had brand new one installed. And I was like, there's no way. Walked up there. Man, you could have knocked someone out with that paper filter. And it was just, it gets hard as a rock and wet. So pulled it out. So just something to notice with that. And also back to what Justin was saying with the switches, right? The one way you're going to notice those switches is being thorough in your service call, because we go after some people right? And it is what it is, not to name names. We go after people who are not thorough. They're a force a defrost and leave kind of person.
Mm-hmm.
And if you ain't amping them out and you ain't checking, you'll never know, because we had one at a store where me and Justin actually spent a lot of time together down in Tarpon area where, dude, the freaking meat cooler looked like the Titanic in there, this big old ice chunk. And it was because the other people that had the store just kept forcing defrost and leaving. And it was make temp. Like, she'll clear. It'll be all right. But just be thorough in checking those switches. Now also you want to talk about what the fans do during defrost on the meat coolers and everything and something
Yeah.
to check for. Yeah.
Yeah, so on the meat coolers, right, your fans are supposed to shut off on your meat cooler, but on your meat prep, your fans are going to run, right? There's a difference between the two. Your meat prep is going to be above 32, right? So that's going to basically be off cycle, right? But your meat cooler is going to be a defrosted evaporator. So you're going to have heaters, so you want your fans to shut off. It's not good to have your fans running, believe it or not, with your heaters on, because that's going to cause your coil to get a lot more ice buildup. Now, make sure, I notice on these meat cooler, the actual walk-in meat coolers, sometimes they'll only have one defrost a day on those. And I normally like to have at least two for about 35 minutes-ish, 40 minutes. Like we were saying, here in Florida, defrosts need to be there more than once a day. You need more than one defrost on basically everything, right? Because it is not dry here. No. And the other thing is, I don't care what store you're in, they leave the door open. So you're going to have the door, unless you have a door alarm or some strategy to keep people from, leaving that door open, you're going to have ice buildup in there. So make sure that your heaters are working and you're walking. Now, it's normal to see a little frost on your coil. That's totally normal. But if you're seeing, like he was saying with the Titanic, a huge glacier on there, obviously you have an issue, right? A big issue. So it could be that your drain pan heater is bad, or it could be that either side of your coil, because there's a heater on the left, a heater on the right, and then there's one in the pan. So make sure all three are working.
And also on the meat cooler, something else we've found, right? Had a store down that we've been doing a lot of work at. It needs help. It just needs a lot of love. But the thing is, the other guys that do the service there are just clearing the drain and leaving. There's a reason, right, in the meat coolers especially. There's a reason they plug up, right? Then it's like, time to screw with the service guy, right? We got and Justin found one. I mean, literally him and two other guys at all day washing just the meat cooler coils. Remember, they were just disgusting. It was so bad he had to have a guy on the bottom squeegeeing it.
And I have something to say about cleaning the meat coolers. Make sure that you cover your behind when you do these. And when I say what I mean by that is that whole room is going to be filled with meat. And at this specific customer, they don't normally move 90% of the product, right? This is going to sound bad. When we shut these down, this is pre-planned. We talk with management. This is always planned, right? At this point, we always plan this. That way we cover our butt and that they know the situation. But the most recent one that we did, what he's talking about, is we planned this over a week in advance. We show up, nothing was pulled. So I got with management. They said, all right, we're going to pull stuff. So they pulled most of the stuff in the way of the coils, right? So they pulled all the carts under the coils on the floor. They got all the stuff out of the way, but then there's shelving, right? And these shelves are filled with meat, front to back. They're supposed to pull all of that, of course, because the meat cannot be above, what is it, about 30, 38, 40
yeah,
degrees.
I mean, yeah, and 41's the real scary mark, right? But you always want to play it safe, be under that for sure.
And, we told them, is all the product going to be pulled? Are they pulling only certain things in here? What's happening? They said, oh, well, this is all we're going to be able to pull. So I said, okay, well, if that's all you guys are going to pull, we're going to start. So then we started. We washed all the coils. The coils weren't down for very, the box wasn't down for very long. The cooler only got to, I don't know, like 50 degrees, right? Which doesn't seem that bad. They temped the meat afterward, and it was right on the brink of going bad. Yeah. But management was all mad afterward because they said, well, why didn't you make sure everything was pulled? And we said, well, we did. We spoke to the area manager, and they said that that's all they're going to be able to pull. So now we won't even do anything unless everything's pulled in there, because then they're going to try and pull some stunts saying that you caused their product to go bad. So just make sure that you cover yourself and get everything pulled. And
And
unless everything's pulled, don't do it.
yep. And then, like us, we talked, and we'll talk about this a lot, time and date stamp
Yeah.
photos. Oh man, because Justin knows I'll argue with anybody for any of our guys. I'll fight anybody for anybody that works for us. But man, time and date stamp photos sure do make it, because people tend to get quiet when you start sending them time and date stamp photos. You get there's no response. I'm like, silence, crickets on the other end, which is,
they have nothing to say.
that is fine, right? So, but yeah, I think that's good. And also, like when he said about the doors, there is times, Justin knows, where we have done double or triple the amount of strip curtains that really should be on a door, and the store doesn't like it. But I'll tell you right now, it's amazing. It keeps the stuff from icing up if we could do extra strip curtains on those things, but just be mindful of all these things on the coolers, man. And don't, like, when you're going out on these service calls, you want to be very precise, and not to get too much in the soft skills of service call etiquette, but Justin's got his own way. I like to try to do the same thing every time. If I'm going to work, try everything, you don't miss anything, but just be mindful. Those switches have gotten everybody, and they will continue to get everybody for the rest of eternity,
Yeah.
So
they've gotten me many times. I've totally gone to a call and I'm not even paying attention to it. And I'm like, the heaters aren't working. I go out, the contactor's pulled in the defrost panel. I know we're sending voltage out there, and I'm like, what's happening here? And then I pull that switch. I'm like, oh, that's all it is. The switch is off.
Yep.
Yeah, that's all it is.
Absolutely, man. And see, we didn't want to cram all this into what we did last week, because there's a lot. There's a lot to be had in talking about this. Now with the drains, okay, something very specific on the low profile evacs. There's a main drain pan. We all know that. But there are two tiny little drain pans that divert water. And on the meat coolers, a lot of times that's where the heater is. But you gotta drop those, because you wouldn't believe, you probably get a handful of stuff, out of there, of what's in those little drain pans.
Yeah, when you guys do a cleaning on a low profile, like if the main coil itself on the outside, the side that you can see, is that dirty, the inside's 3 times worse, right? A little story about this. There was a produce cooler at a specific customer we do a lot, and you can look up into the fans, and you can see the inside, and you can just see it was just covered, just like a rug on there, right? So you pull that main drain pan down, and then what he was just talking about, there's these 2 little pans that they're like channels, right? Just 2 little channels that divert the water from the coil, and it just sends it down into the main drain pan. And when you pull those off, those will just be covered with gunk and slime and everything, dirt. Pull those off. Those need to be cleaned, because if those are clogged up and those are full, you're going to leak water out of the sides. It's just going to be throwing water out of the evap if those are filled.
Absolutely. And
take your time on it.
Yes. And when you're putting these bad boys back together, they're going to be these fan guards that go over. Okay. You don't have to send them with like 50 Ugga Duggas when you're just running her in, right? Just barely tight, because here's what's happening. You'll come across, like, we got a store that is from 96, very close to us. And you'll be like, that's a pretty big screw. It starts out at 5/16 and it goes to 3/8 and it's 7/16 and it's a lag bolt before it's all over. Okay. So just be mindful when you're putting those back together. And also, another thing, when you're putting those drain pans up, be mindful where you're running the screws, okay? Because, dude, if you're off this much, you'll go right into a coil, right? Which has happened to everybody.
There's not many places, guys, on low-profile coils to actually mount them. Wherever those mounting screws are, that's it. There's nowhere else to mount them. So try your very best not to remount those holes. And like we're saying, the screw will just get bigger and bigger and bigger. And then it's to the point where, like, what am I going to do with this, And
absolutely.
Make sure your screws. What I like to do, it's not hard to run a screw through a coil if you're not paying attention, which is why what I like to do with this is take the screw that you're going to use and just see, is it even possible for that screw to hit the coil? Because if I accidentally over drill it or it goes right through the metal quick, am I going to hit that coil? If I use the proper size screw that's just simply not long enough to hit the coil, then I don't have to worry about it, right? But also pay attention. Don't use like a 4-inch long screw,
Yeah,
guys.
that'll send her. Yeah, but the thing is, like, we got a guy also that works with us, and he showed me he's got these tiny little, like, real small, real short, fat screws, and those are good too, right? Because you have no chance of hitting that coil ever.
Anybody at Gulf Coast that needs any fasteners, call Grandpa Mike. Grandpa Mike has
Grandpa Mike's he's got plenty of fasteners, saves them
all the
all,
fasteners.
saves them all, man. So, but no, man,
You
this
want
is
to
good. Go ahead.
you want to talk about low temp freezers, how they work at
Yes, yes, at
the
both
store I work at a lot?
the defrost and all. So the stores that Justin and we do all do a lot of work at is it's same as the meat cooler, same idea, right? There, some of them are low profile, but some of them are just front discharge evaporators, right? And they got heaters in the coil, but they got a bunch of heaters. Could be 8, 10, 12 heaters, and they got them in the pan, right? So luckily, most of the stores we have, like when you're checking defrost, right? Obviously, we know we got to shut our refrigeration off. We got to shut our fans off, right? We know that. But the amps on the heaters, this will get you, right? Because you can be like, well, it's drawing 8 amps. It's got to be close, right? No, you gotta measure them, right? And if need be, you can go inside on the evap if the data tag's still there. That'll tell you a lot of information. You know what I mean? And then also, I'm not saying this is everywhere, but we've been lucky that it's at our stores. Is somebody wrote the startup amps out there, okay? And
Yeah.
sometimes it's faded. You can be like 20, 20, 20. Okay, that's good. But if it's like 12, 8, 25, you're like, uh-oh. So
Yeah, something's not right.
then so you could check it out at the rack, but then you go in the store, in the box, open up either side, opposite side of the TXV or wherever the power is coming in, and you can amp each heater, and you'll find which one. This one's not the same as the others, and that'll be a good place to start with that.
So for you guys, at a lot of these stores, you're going to have a defrost panel, right? And it's going to be out in the rack, and whether it's going to be, one long panel or one big square panel, all your contactors for your walk-ins are going to be out there on these Kaiser racks, right? On these Kaiser racks, it's going to be a blue box. And for your walk-ins, you're going to have a evaporator fan motor contactor, and then you're going to have a defrost contactor. So the way it works is you're going to have, when your defrost engages, it's going to pull out your contactor for your fans, and then it's going to pull in your contactor for your defrost, right? So you shouldn't be getting power to your fans. If you are getting power to your fans, I would definitely look into that contactor, right? Because unless it's a store that doesn't have an evaporator or fan contactor, then it could be something else. But a lot of the time, I found one time that there was a contactor that was just stuck shut. It just, welded together, and it caused the fans to run during defrost. Or it could be sometimes on Novar controllers, you can force an output and they'll just have the fans forced on for whatever reason, or who knows. Just be diligent. Make sure your fans are shutting off, like you said. Make sure you have a roughly equal amount of amps on all your heaters, because you actually found at a store one of the legs was burnt up. We weren't getting power on one of our legs of power.
We're only getting 2 legs. And here's the thing: being in a hurry, you can be like, oh, I got amps. Yeah, you put your hand up there. She's hot, boys. Get her with the Wonder Gun. She's hot. But you got to really make sure, man. And also, if it's a store you're in all the time, you're going to know the shenanigans that have gone on. But Justin found where me and another guy had put on a KE2 a long time ago, right? An EVAP Plus controller, and because they were using it for a grocery pickup, and that was his whole thing. But this old boy came in there, and he's like, I don't know what this is. He took it out and put a defrost time clock in, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And what a disaster that was. He had no temp controller, nothing. So Justin ended up, of course, it was a Friday afternoon, because why wouldn't it be? Ended up rewiring it all. Now, we were able to get it figured out. He sent me some pictures. We got it figured out, right? But the thing is, I'm telling you, is just be mindful of hackery, right? And also pictures, because if Justin remembers, I had taken pictures when I first put it in. So at least I had an idea of what was on refrigeration and what was on fan. So we're able to wire it all in and get it going. But just
guys, don't put a time clock on a rack.
No.
Just don't do it.
No.
There's no reason. Like, why are we reinventing the wheel here, right? If you have a rack
taking a step back.
Yeah. Like, we're not working on a remote condensing unit here, guys. So what they did was they wired the solenoid for refrigeration hot all the time. So whether it was in defrost or in refrige mode, it was on. And the reason it was icing up is because we were refrigerating while we were in defrost. Yeah, the fans were cutting out, but it doesn't matter because we're still refrigerating while we're in defrost. So make sure that everything stays on the rack. I know it sounds crazy because, like, why would someone go through all that effort, right, to put a time clock on a rack? But they would, because some people just don't know how the rack
Yep.
defrost works, so they'd rather just hack it up and put a time clock on there.
Absolutely. So just be mindful, man. Watch, look, don't take anything for granted. Open those stinking panels up when you come in on this, right? Don't just assume it's right. Because here's the thing, like we just had a bunch of these pain in the neck arc flash contactors put in, right? They've been put in everywhere, okay? And that's fine, I get it. But if somebody else's hands have been in there, you want to look, see, did they not hook up something? Did they not do this? Did they not do that? So just always check that stuff, make sure. So, just be diligent. But I think this is good to talk about with all this, and we'll start working on some more stuff about Novar. We're gonna have to try. Justin's been making some videos of how to do certain things. CPC is pretty good, and I'm gonna try to work on getting some videos made as well. But Novar is its own thing, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Just knowing how to work on them. So,
and all the Novars is different, right? So you're going to have several different Novar controllers, and they all work differently, and it's proprietary at a certain place. They're the only people that use it. So,
and then we'll have what else we'll talk about in the future is also the SC3 controllers.
Yeah.
So that they're relative. They aren't new, but the updated version is all new. Yes. So we'll start talking about that too. But thank you guys very much. We appreciate it.
Thank you guys.
All right. See you.